This is the Sacred Business Podcast, a show for spiritual women identifying entrepreneurs and leaders. I am Sora Suriano. On this show, you'll meet inspiring guests, get some business tips, experience sacred practices, and listen to my personal lessons as a business owner. As a transformational business coach, powerful medicine woman, inspirational speaker, fire igniter, heart whisperer, and world traveler, I've helped hundreds of women around the world heal their stories and transform their sacred businesses. It's time for us to claim our rightful and equitable place in entrepreneurship through scaling our business efforts. You are worthy, divine sister. Welcome to episode 9. Today's guest is Rebecca Campbell. Rebecca is a writer and devotional artist who leads activating workshops internationally, giving people an experience of their soul. She is the best-selling author of numerous books and oracle decks, including Light is the New Black and the Work Your Light Oracle, and the creator of the Rise Sister Rise membership. Through all of Rebecca's creations, she encourages people all over the world to spend more time with their soul and connect to their own inner temple. Rebecca, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you. So nice to be talking to you again, Sarah.
Oh, I always absolutely love having a time and space for us to connect, and may we continue to find other ways to do so.
Yeah.
I'd love to drop in really, really quickly already and ask if there was a time in your life where you had to make a powerful choice, and what was it?
Oh my gosh.
I'm bringing you right in.
Yeah, it's like, let's not ease into it. Several. But the one that really comes to mind is, I think that all of us, no matter who we are, we're not immune to rock bottoms, and if we're properly living our lives, we will experience them at some point. And I think the most powerful decision I made would have been in one of my rock bottom moments where I had to, or was being invited over and over again to surrender to that intelligent force that I believe is always whispering to us, is always, it's our intuition as well. Surrendering to that part that is within all of us and that had been keeping me up at 3 a.m. at night. At such a common time to be woken up when you're going through a difficult time, and to finally loosen my grip and be courageous enough to allow that part to fully lead.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I have shivers because I find that it happens multiple times in our lives. And I find that currently it's happening with myself right now too, the 3-4 o'clock in the morning, places of fears. And I'm wondering, in that mist, which we can all feel viscerally, if we are living, we have had those moments and we may be going through them now. And when we say yes to leaning into that, what can we do to stay present and ride the wave until we get to the other side of it?
Well, I think practically staying as grounded as we possibly can. And my number one way of doing that is literally nature, letting the earth hold us if we can find a patch of earth, and just recognizing that as rocky as the rocks are that we find ourselves on, or as rocky as the sea is, or our emotions are, to realize that as we are riding those waves, we are still safe and held, even though internally we might feel absolutely uncomfortable and like we would prefer to be someplace else. To recognize that those feelings and emotions and fears and whatever else is present, they can be present, and we can still also be held by that thing that is greater, which I think that mystic sages through the ages have been trying to grapple with. And I know you and I are kind of devoting our lives to try and understand, and we're just scratching the surface, but there is this intelligence that really does, it tells the flowers when to open, it tells the seasons when to come and go, the tides to roll in and out. And that force is also within us. And, I remember in one of my deepest rock bottom moments, it's like real deep grief. And the hardest thing for me at that moment, I went and saw a shamanic healer I was working with. And we pretty much spent the whole session during this period just getting me to breathe. I don't know if you've had a moment like that.
Yes.
And I realized how, I don't know if it was my soul or my ego, but there was a part of me that was like, it was a struggle to even take a breath, because I was resisting life, really. And I think that's a real normal thing to do when our lives around us are crumbling, or just things that we once defined ourselves by are changing and falling away. And these things that maybe once served us no longer do. And then we're grappling to just hold on to those things that we once defined ourselves by. And that's really scary.
So true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting, because as we continue to do this powerful inner work, I find that, for myself at least, from a personal note, I'm required to go through these initiations more frequently.
Oh gosh, I know.
Right. And so the more we know the cycle, we're like, yes, we get it. And what's really great is that I do see my viewer self really holding the vision and knowing and trusting. And so, like you said, the connection with Mother Earth to deepen in, the connection with your healers, and you actually saying yes to being supported is a huge thing. And third, what for me I find is also having a really powerful counsel of trusted advisors, both in the unseen realm and the seen realm. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about, without naming names, let's say, but just who do you find that you need in your trusted counsel that you can really just surrender into for support?
Yeah, so I feel very blessed that I, at this stage in my life now, finally have a trusted counsel, because I never really felt I did earlier on. But my trusted counsel now, some of them are actually very wise healers and teachers and all that kind of stuff, but that's not why they're my trusted counsel.
Right.
They're my trusted counsel because instead of trying to fix me in that moment, they have the wisdom to recognize that what's really needed is to trust the process. And instead of trying to, if I am going through some form of initiation, which no one is immune to, we always are, they will meet me where I am and just hold my hand rather than try and fix the situation. So it's like they're trusting my own inner wisdom. They're trusting my soul's plan, for example. They're the best helpers I'm finding. I find so often in the spiritual world that we can over spiritualize things. And for example, if we twist our ankle and then it's like, oh, are you moving too fast, or are you not moving forward? It's like, do you not think that I have asked these questions of myself? You asking me this is not helping me, So I think so often it's like we just need to be held in those moments and to be prompted to seek the support that is the right support. Do you relate to that?
I totally do, yes. The other part that I do realize with my trusted counsel is they can share my blind spots, and I will listen and really discern if it feels true or not true. And so I wonder, for myself, for example, I will get myself really busy and make all of the great excuses why I'm so busy, including their divine downloads. And my trusted counsels will be like, really? Is that true, Sora? Or are you kind of not really looking and identifying or feeling, like breathing and feeling all of it?
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder what might be some of those little things that your trusted counsels will kind of call you out on.
I think taking things too personally, and perhaps not protecting myself fiercely enough. They may come in and just kind of whip me into gear and say, like, here's a door you left open type thing.
Totally.
Yeah. And then I think also because like one of my gifts is being able to go to the depths and feel them. But sometimes that's also, I think anyone who's remotely artistic or a deep sea diver, sometimes we need help to come back up to the surface. So I've actually recently, my inner counsel, as that's what you called it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I have so many more men in there now, and it's like they're teaching me to get out of the emotions and not take things so personally, and to really just be quite fierce and unemotional in my reactions, not overthinking so much. So that's interesting. I think that's interesting when you notice your inner counsel beginning to change a little bit. It probably is an indication of the medicine that you might need more or just how you're changing.
Totally. And thank you for sharing that we have permission to continuously change and evolve. And so who we call in physically in the unseen realm, what kind of experiences we're having currently, all of that is a signification around just what new areas or new terrain we're exploring.
Right.
I love that. This is just random question now, we're shifting gears. When you were a child, what was one of your favorite games?
It was like dress ups and doing shows.
Of course. So look at you now.
Singing. Yeah, we used to, my childhood friends and I, it was like our parents were best friends. And so it was like two girls who were daughters of them. And then my brother and I, we would do these shows in order to, say we were bored just playing at home. We'd do these full-on shows to be like, we want to go bowling or to the movies or whatever. And we spent hours and hours performing and like crafting and all of that. By the time we performed it was like time to go home. But yeah, that was fun.
I love that. And did you find that as you continue to grow through the years, that performance was a big part of your life? Or do you find that happened later on again?
Yeah, it was. I remember in high school feeling like I'd missed my moment, which is absolutely because I'm like a teenager, but I'm like, I did dancing, but I didn't do the Stedfords, or I didn't do that. So I was kind of like, I think it's too late for me as a performer.
I mean, teen crisis is for real. Come on.
I know, it's so true. Yeah. And so, yeah, it definitely is. I think what I loved about the performances is just thinking about all of the different creative elements coming together and hearing the music, seeing the visuals. And yeah, I definitely use that in my work now.
I love it. And can you share a little bit about how you do use that in your work now? What are some of the areas within the way in which you serve that comes forward?
Yeah, totally. So, Oracle decks are one of my offerings. I love doing them. And so when I was younger, I used to ride the school bus and then see those performances, often listening to like ABBA music. Like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert movie was very big, and so was Muriel's Wedding in Australia.
So good, yes.
my Sony Ericsson Walkman and plan those performances. But I received the information through I now know my intuitive senses, like getting the clairvoyancy with the clear vision, and then the other senses following. And so with the Oracle deck, particularly, I had a lot of the key images, particularly my first deck, and I'm working on my second now, really came to me in meditation or as I was walking in nature. And I was fortunate to partner with a great artist who was able to really bring them to life. And some of them are really exactly how I'd always envisaged them. And so I think that that's definitely a way that comes together. The other, prior to writing books and doing oracle decks and those kind of creations as well, prior to that, I worked as a copywriter, an art director, and creative director. And that was really using those skills as well. It was like the art direction plus the words. And I think the process of creativity is really putting two things together that feel like they don't belong, but then you put them together and if they click together in a way that feels surprising. And I think that is that process. So even with events now, like I'm always looking for ways to innovate creatively. And so like I do projections or incorporate chanting. And yeah, I think when those different forms of creative expression drop in, it's that similar feeling that I got of being that little girl thinking, what ABBA song should we lip sync next?
Totally. I love
totally
what you
normal, right?
Yes, it actually sounds very normal. We would have been good friends.
Yeah.
I love what you said about this idea with creativity, finding two forms that may not seem like they would fit together and then finding a way that they do. And I find that is us as entrepreneurs, that we have these ideas, and rather than following someone else because they put two forms together and created something, it's our time to create and innovate in that way as well. And so I'm wondering if you could put it into tangible form. In your current state, is there a good idea that, or a channeled idea that came through where they were possibly two forms and you found this way of weaving them together?
So you mean an idea that came in and then it's like we found a different way of expressing it?
Either a different way or two ideas came together and you thought, I'm not sure about this.
Oh, gosh. Yes, I mean, I think that's every creative process.
Right? So to our viewers, maybe, or to our listeners, maybe just having a tangible understanding will help them realize they too can co-create that for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of one. I can't think of one off the top of my head right now, but let me. So, for example, with the Oracle decks that I'm working with Danielle Knoll, I think that why, we were connected because our aesthetics were so similar. And what I love about that aesthetic is that, and particularly her work, is that she's bringing together, and we're bringing together two things that don't necessarily look like they fit together. So it might be like the spiritual realm, which you could say, and this is just an extreme, I'm pushing it, could be like a little bit corny, lots of purples.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with purple, but the classic sunrise type visuals with, say, something which is more illustrated or there's collage involved, which feels like a different type of creative realm, or something that looks a little bit more modern. And so putting those two things together that don't belong. Also, I think that I'm looking at we've got a new deck coming out next year. It's not available for purchase or anything yet, but a lot of the images that I'm looking up on my wall, which is filled with them, they're very surrealist. So my experiences of being in those, because I feel very connected, as I know you are as well, to the concept of star seeds and what exists beyond just this physical realm here on this planet. And a lot of them are, for example, we've used a lot of underwater shots. And the reason for that was because my experience when I've connected with different realms is like, obviously we know gravity doesn't exist in many of them, but it's like this feeling of weightlessness. And so how do you visualize that without being in water? So a lot of the images are beings and people as well, appearing to be floating, but they're not in water. So there are two things that don't look like they belong, or a mirror that you can actually move through.
Right.
So, Alice in Wonderland, for example, being a great surrealistic example. Salvador Dali, like putting two things together. Like I remember one of my favorite pieces of art of Salvador Dali is there is a boat that has flowers as the sails. Now it's like, what? Why is that there?
Yeah.
But then and I think this is why I think art is such a great gateway to the soul or intuition or intuitive senses, because it opens, it confuses the mind. So it's like this door is being opened for the soul to step forward. And, the ancient Greeks spoke about kairos time and chronos time. Chronos time being linear time, kairos time being right time, or I would call it soul time, creative time, healing time, serendipity, where that happens. And so, putting two things together that don't look like they belong sometimes confuses the mind and invites the soul to step forward. It's why when we hear poetry, our heart is able to breathe out a little bit, because the mind is not as present as the soul. It invites the soul to step forward.
I love that. Absolutely. It is. I love what you said around confusing the mind. So rather than try to outsmart the mind or overthink the mind or bypass the mind, sometimes disrupting the mind can help create this access point to go further inward and downward. So I love that. And yes,
describing it.
Yes. And so that's a great way to describe also how poetry and art does that. When you look at something like surrealist and you're like, I don't understand. And you're not supposed to understand from your mind, but then all of a sudden you get really curious and you're led by these emotions, which leads me to a lot of the time when we speak about business or success or, oh my goodness, well, Rebecca Campbell, she's got several books and an Oracle deck and many on the way and programs, and she speaks and retreats. How did she get there? And there's this desire to uncover it from like actual steps, because of course I'm being sarcastic, but yes, if I just follow the way Beck did it, I too will get there. It's absolutely not true. So I wonder rather if you can pinpoint a moment in time when something shifted and there were feelings that led to your path to expansion. And what would be your feelings that created that?
I'd say it was this dance between, I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning. I know I was focusing more on the rock bottom part of it, but this surrendering to this whisper, this call of the soul, which is, I think, very subtle, by the way. I don't think it's this loud, clear telegram from God or whatever we call.
Though we wish it to be sometimes.
Exactly. I mean, I remember praying over and over again for like this loud answer, but it was never the loud answer, but it was consistent. And so surrendering to that and as I said before, asking that part to lead, then showing up to that part every day. The best decision I ever made was daily practice. Very, very basic, but honestly, I was a dabbler before that. I used to do a decent amount of practice, but it tended to be once or twice a week for a long period of time. So the biggest shift for me, and I guess my work is very much soul-based and spirit-based as well, but I think anyone who is wanting to create a soul-led life, this goes where you don't have to be teaching the materials.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, it was like very much prioritizing that intelligent force, spirit, soul, God, whatever you want to call it, and showing up to it in a disciplined way. At the beginning, that was very necessary for me, the discipline, like literally like going to the gym, but working out and communing, working on that relationship with my intuition or with my soul. That was the number one. The guidance I got during that time, and I was doing a daily meditation, but the real clear guidance I got during that time, I knew I needed to, from teachers I'd had, like feed that part of me. Just like, if you've got an altar, you feed your altar, you kind of freshen the flowers or say your prayers over it. And for me, it was feeding that relationship I had with what I call my soul. So I could clearly hear the whispers a lot more loudly. Day by day, they got clearer and clearer. It was only because I spent more time with it. And then there were two other parts to it. One of them was I made a pact that when I would hear the whispers, I would act on it. I see it over and over again, and I saw it in my own life. I think that receiving guidance, while it is subtle, is very common. We are all receiving guidance constantly. We might think we're not, but in reality, we are. The real difference, I believe, in really transforming our lives to like dancing in that harmony is acting on the calls and the baby calls, not like the big calls. If you're getting the guidance of writing a book, for example, that is huge and overwhelming. But what is the baby step each day? And I think when I began to like properly put into action the little bite-sized baby calls without quite knowing how it was all going to come together, that's really when a really big shift, like the energy of my life changed. Because I was living it rather than trying to control and consciously create my life. Now, I'm not against manifestation or that. Like I was definitely still doing that, but at the core of it, I made the flip so that I was completely in service and surrender to that intelligence.
Yeah.
And then acting on it, And so if I showed up to my daily practice and heard the little baby call for that day, then it was like, woohoo, my job's done. Anything beyond that is great. And then I think the other bit that I did that really made a big impact and continues to is I got this real clear guidance of what I needed to do was follow what lights me up, which when I got that guidance, I thought it was a little bit basic and I was looking for something a lot louder and clearer. But I'd studied intuition. I knew to trust it. And so for me, it was what that means is when we're lit up, we're in our soul, we're in our spirit. And so again, it's feeding that part of us. And so for me, that was when I really discovered how important surrounding myself with beauty is for my soul anyway. Maybe there's people listening who have a similar tendency with that. But when I'm surrounded by beauty, like nature and flowers and the art and things like that, I get inspired so much more quickly. So that was definitely another really big step that it was a baby step at the time, but it had a big impact in my life. And now I look at it, and at the time it was like it started just buying myself a bunch of flowers, whereas now I'm like, I look at my whole house and just aesthetically I see how from following that one baby step, I've just moved into this house, which I didn't even know, but I've just found out that the two owners before me, she was known throughout the town as like basically being the owner of the Rose House.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know. So it was like peonies, which is my favorite rose.
Oh.
And like which are the Sarah Bernhardt's my favorite. And all of these roses she used to, I'm living in Glastonbury now, and which is very much an unexpected call.
Yes. And yet it feels so right and true.
Right, I know. And yeah, and so as we moved in little by little, I've been praying to the land, some land, to call me home to it. And we were very much led here unexpectedly, and it's no place has ever felt more like home. And yeah, little by little, as the months progress, we're discovering more and more about really the spirit of this land and the flowers that are here. And it's like every day, or probably every week at the moment, because it's spring, there's a new kind of patch of the garden that is revealing itself to us. And so, yeah, and I think that's what happens when we surrender to that mystery. And I think and I know it takes so much courage to do that, because it's like, I liken it to Dorothy when she's following the yellow brick road. She's heading to Oz, which of course is not Oz, and she ends up being home, and it's always there, and we know it's a spiral journey, but at the time we doubt it, and all of our fears come up. But it's like the way I used to live my life, and I still have a tendency to, I have to constantly remind myself, is that I feel like I need to select the golden bricks. I need to call in the cement mixes. I need to curate the garden all around it. But in reality, I just need to walk that path and trust that the path will be paved before me. So yeah, they're my three, I'd say, the practical things that I've done that have had the biggest impact on my life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I find that, so based on what you shared, the first thing you did was feed your spirit. And there feels like such a place of devotion, like true, unconditional, loving devotion. And from that, it became a disciplined practice. That feels incredibly sacred. And then you listened and followed the whispers. And that feels yet again devotional, but devotional to movement, to saying yes and being pulled forth from your heart space. And then you fed yourself. You followed what lit you up. And so there was this joy and curiosity and delight that occurred as you fed yourself. And I think that part we forget. It's the feeding of ourselves. And then as you were doing that, you just noticed the different patches that would reveal itself, just like your garden, when we don't get to see the whole garden in its glory until maybe there's a moment in time, or we never fully see it because there's the next set of unfolding that happens. But I find that's really beautiful. So thank you for those steps.
Pleasure.
My goodness. Before we end, I'm wondering if your soul would like to share any last minute thoughts, feelings, shares before we close.
Yeah, I just say that if there's anyone listening who has been receiving whispers or yearnings, or maybe they're being called towards it but are really scared to share their voice, to share their creations, to step into something that might not make logical sense, or they're feeling like someone's already done it before, or there's no one representing who I am, then I really want to encourage you to trust the voice within. Trust that, particularly if you're being called to do something that requires courage, to breathe into it and find the courage to do it. You know, it takes courage to live a soul-led life. It takes courage to lead. So often, us as leaders, one of the reason we feel like we doubt our calling is because we can't quite see the perfectly laid out path before us, or the person who looks like us, sounds like us. And the thing about leading is that very often that path hasn't been paved before. And that's why it takes courage. And so if you're being called to lead or to create, which is another form of leadership, or share your voice, I just really, really want to encourage you to find that courage to just take the first little baby step. And I know that it does feel sometimes really scary to do that. But in my experience, the more you do it, the easier it gets and the less afraid we feel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And I really love the honoring of there are those who have laid paths that we can be inspired by, but our paths are only laid by us. Mm-hmm. And in that way, that's actually quite powerful that we can really step into in the individuation of us and our calling in our creation. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks so much, my love.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Sacred Business Podcast with me, Sora Suryano. If you love the show and desire to know more, check out sorasuryano.com. I would also so appreciate it if you would leave a love note, aka a review on iTunes. Now, remember, you have the power to create anything. You are able to bring forth beauty, abundance, and grace in your business and life every day while living a life that is wild, free, and calm. You are worthy, divine sister.